Okay, I think this is kind of like the second attempt at episode 4. Am I supposed to tell you that? No, I'm not sure if I am. Seriously, don't know if I'm fucking breaking something, some like unwritten rule. But this is episode 4, and this episode will actually talk about some ideas I have about the film industry because I'm kind of getting sick of being that liaison for the film. I'm really sick of talking up films that they don't invest time into fucking trying to market to people anymore. It's kind of sad. Like I've never seen an industry basically pay for itself and watch themselves fail. Like they're just by design alone, they're fucking up so badly. It's interesting. And they'll say, no, it's because of COVID. No, you were doing this shit before COVID. I know, I'm just randomly talking about stuff. But anyway, so episode 4, this is Fistful of Fuckery. And I am going to be helming the idea of why have I become an unpaid liaison for the film industry? Why am I a person that's so in tune with what's going on and what's coming out that I do word of mouth and average people have no clue what the fuck I'm talking about? I just showed them a magic trick. Impromptu, just fucking randomly. It's like, here you go, it's a magic trick. Look, a film. It's fucking sad. So, before I get into away with all my nonsense, I'm just going to say a couple of things. Most of the shit I say, and there's going to be a disclaimer added to this, because I know there has to be one, is speculative, right? I operate with the idea that things could be hypothesis or how I'm reading it. Meaning that I'm analyzing something and I'm kind of gleaning this is a thing. Like, one of the bold statements I'm going to say about the film thing is it's like these executives realized that there's a finite amount of money, which is bizarre. Like, they realize that we are limited. There is a limit on how much money we can spend, right? And they're doing the same thing. They're spending large chunks and fuckloads of money on these big, huge fucking problems, these big, huge productions and lavish. Same problem happens. Same fucking problem happens. This is probably like, I don't know, the third or fourth cycle this has happened with the film industry, right? And don't get me wrong, some of the big productions, at least this time around, are actually somewhat decent. Like, I like the Marvel stuff. I'm sorry, fuck you. I like it, right? I'm actually looking forward to the James Gunn helming the DC universe. That's interesting to me too. Shit. Even though I don't like musicals, I'm interested in Wicked. So, again, it is the thing, right? But somewhere along the line, it seems like they just figured that, oh shit, there's only so much money we can spend. And I think this is the reason why you hear a lot of the older directors and people just heavily criticize the commercial, the blockbusters, because now they've become basically sci-fi fantasy based, right? And that's the thing. Because they don't have the money to stretch. They don't have the attention span to stretch. They don't have the things. They basically broke down their system. Now, what I just said is all fucking speculative, right? I mean, I have some context clues, right? And some facts that actually happened. But it's just me interpreting this stuff. I'm looking at it going, this has to be what's going on. Because it's the only explanation for it, right? And basically, that's how this whole podcast is going to play itself out. Okay? Sidebar. I'm actually going to tell you how difficult of a process. I told you at the very beginning, this is basically the second draft of this episode. And a lot of it has to do with just internal shit I'm challenging myself to do. Because actively, in casual conversation, I will talk about this with anybody. But to present it to you as a general audience, like people outside the natural conversation, one-on-one conversation, small group conversation, I'm now sharing it to whoever is listening to this, right? And you're like, this dude, who the fuck is this guy? Exactly, right? But over the years, I've kind of forecast things that have come to pass. Like, there's evidence. Like, currently right now, there's arguments suggesting that the Marvels and Thor 4 were badly edited. And when I left the theater, I knew that already. They're not necessarily bad films. They're just badly assembled. The fourth part of the process of filmmaking was poorly done. And it has business, the American TM, the business hand written all over it. Okay? That's normal. I don't have any fucking evidence of this. I'm just basing it on context clues and what I'm seeing, my assessment, which is refined over time. I'm almost pushing 50. I'm Gen X. So I'm looking at this stuff going, this is how that is. But overall, the film industry itself is in a fucking problem. They're having problems. And they're having problems because they broke down their fucking model, in my honest opinion. Right? And that's what I'm going to talk about. I know I just gave you 7 minutes to get to this point. But I'm being honest. A lot of things I'm going to speculate because sometimes data travels in a very weird-ass way. And there's enough disinformation and enough, people assessing things, but not accurately, doing their best to present to you a good hypothesis, right? Some of the things I'm going to say, they're speculative. They're hypotheses or maybe even theories at that point in time. I've seen it replicate itself enough to suggest, this is leaning more towards theory than not, right? Now, how I base all my thinking is simply this. I base it on the fact that if I'm looking at something and I'm going, this is leaning more towards this way than that way, I know it's big as fuck, but, this is leaning more, I'll give you an example. Like Thor 4, not necessarily a bad idea. A lot of interesting stories put together, okay? And I see in the movie, and there's literally a scene that should naturally be in the film. Now, for those who haven't seen it, fuck you. By this point in time, you should have seen the fucking movie. Jesus Christ, man. Oh, woman. Whatever the fuck, right? You should have seen this already. So, but there is a scene that you'll see is unnatural. So, Valkyrie and Korg are on the ship, and he's singing, and she leans into the counter, and both Thors, Jane Foster and Odinson, right, are on the deck. And the simple shot of them dancing or doing something on the deck should have followed just by normal composition. But it doesn't. To the point where my son looks at me strange. Something should have happened there. I'm like, you're right. So to me, that's a clue. Then some time passes and I'm reading an article or an interview with Christian Bale, and they'd shot a lot more. Similar to the Jared Leto thing. I don't know, two different productions, but similar to the Jared Leto thing. Like, he complained about the Suicide Squad because they shot a lot of film with him playing the Joker, right? And Bale is like, yeah, there's more scenes. more sequences. And it's sad because this film is very important. You didn't realize it's important. Shit, when you're watching this film, you don't even realize there's symbiotes in the film. That's what's even crazier about the concept. It's so weirdly designed that, and badly, actually, it's not designed. Actually, the story's there. It's just badly edited, just badly assembled. And so I'm looking at it, it's more towards this than not. So I don't have the Bale comment yet, and I leave the theater already thinking this, right? So as time is going on, I'm getting more and more information, right? And I'm basing it on the philosophy that somebody along the line that's in a business chair that doesn't give a fuck about the creative, just all they care about is the fucking money, right? And that's death, right? You're like, but no, it's not. It allows for other You're right. I get that. But I will tell you this right now. Bruce Lee still makes money till today. He's been dead for a long fucking time. But his image, his work, still makes money, millions of dollars till today. Okay? Art will recoup its initial loss. Then people will go back to re-examine material, right? I'll give you a good example. Diesel, Mercedes-Benz, back in the 80s, right? I'm not necessarily a big Mercedes person, but they're now popular. I remember arguing with my cousin a while back about a Toyota Corolla. I want to say it was like a 78 or 79 Toyota Corolla. I think they're dope looking, right? I think that whole era of like Japanese cars are kind of cool looking, right? Even then, I thought they were interesting looking, right? They're now popular, right? That's a thing. Comics, I was told, these aren't going to be worth anything because only characters that existed back in the dawn of fucking time are worth anything. No, that's incorrect. It's a fucking lie. It's just dude fucking lies. Actually, I want to say the next episode I cover tangible and intangibles, right? But it's a straight fucking lie, right? Because it's their perception of their reality, right? They think all they had for treasures of Tamagotchi are worth a lot of fucking money. And that's not even really me. That's more of a millennial thing, right? But there's a lot of fucking weird-ass things that just, they retain value. And if they miss the mark, sometimes they get re-examined and re-solicited, right? That's a thing. In my opinion, and this is the whole, just to literally stop the whole Thor 4 thing, right? The Love and Thunder. They should have followed the same model or a similar model to The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. If you take apart The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, there's enough story in the God of God Butcher story, right? To make a really long, interesting film. Jane Foster's story is interesting. There's a lot of interesting shit in that film, right? And you would have set up perfectly for the Null thing. Oh, wait. What are you talking about? Some of you guys don't know. Some of you guys should. Indirectly, that character is involved in this story. That sword is corrupting. So, needless to say, that right there follows the old school model of asses in seats. The more asses in seats, the more ticket money. Right? Sergio Leone exists. If you're not familiar with his work, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, right? Actually, my favorite film from him is Once Upon a Time in the West with Charles Bronson and Henry Fonda. It's a really good film. But what's interesting, I'm going to use that as an example because there's a scene that is, to my understanding, is lost from time. Because asses in seats. Sergio Leone's films are just long, but they're pieces of art. The man could do close-ups and shots and linger, and it just oozes. It's really interesting shit. right? And because theater owners and executives wanted to make the most money, they kept trimming the fucking film. Sometimes to incoherence, right? Things just didn't make sense because you're cutting major things out of the film. So the Charles Bronson bullet removal sequence is not in the film. And to my understanding, they have stills, but it's kind of lost to time. It probably exists. It's probably in somebody's fucking vault somewhere or some situation, but it has not been put back into the film because they couldn't find it, right? The second setup, the Thor 4 film is so rich and dense story, and you're weaving a bunch of different stories out, but you do an interesting, weird thing where you don't necessarily set up a situation where you follow through with the arc established in 3. You know, he can start off hokey, but by the end of the story, it can be really serious. And everybody's character that's in the story is going through their own arc to a certain degree. Gore, Jane Foster, and so on and so forth. But they didn't give it enough time to breathe. And I really think it was asses in seats. Needless to say. So just getting back to the whole speculative thing. So I'm going to look at things and present ideas, interpretations. Not necessarily like a pundit. I'm not trying to spin this shit. I'm just trying to say, it kind of leans that way with me, right? And the reason why for me even fucking doing this is because I've done this before, okay? I'm almost 1,000, right? So I've lived for a long time up to this point, right? And many times I've said stuff to people and they're like, yeah, I've been doing it. That's kind of ridiculous. Like, nah, I think this is like probably one of the best examples. So in 1998, the corporations kind of started flexing hard control on radio stations. At some point in time during this show, I'm going to talk about this because it trips me the fuck out. And I can hear it in the music being played. And again, there's a lot more explanation to that because I'm from New England. So New England had a radio station called WBRU, and that changed. And radio stations started changing. You're like, well, time's passing, things change. Yeah, but more like the way they approach the programming. Like, currently I live in Pittsburgh, so it's interesting because me being here, I start off with TV here. And again, I will talk about this in a larger scale because I've called DV quite a few times to request stuff in, knowing that they're not going to play it, despite the fact that it is rock and roll. Long story. I'm trying to cut down to the thing. Well, I'm kind of giving you like foreshadowing samples for the future, right? So what's interesting is they would actually play a lot of interesting music. Actually, classic rock station is interesting because if you travel across the country, depending on what part of the country you're in, depending on what their focus is on. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, Jay Giles' band is really big in Massachusetts. So, key songs, you hear live versions of these songs. And when I lived in Florida and other places, even here, I don't hear live versions. I hear the studio versions, which is strange. Now, what's even stranger is that they don't really necessarily play the original studio versions anymore. During the tenure of me being here, they've changed the way they approach the music. Now, every so often, you'll have it on the lunch request that they have. But I find it interesting. Like, there's literally thought behind what to present. Like, we're changing our formats, but it's such a subtle thing that your average bear doesn't notice it. But I noticed it because when I first got here, what they played I thought was unusual. Like, they were playing obscure, like not necessarily obscure Pink Floyd, just Pink Floyd that was not standard, not necessarily Dark Side of the Moon. Like, they were playing stuff from like other albums. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, they're playing, like when I was in Florida, there was a classic rock station that played The Doors, Soft Parade. Now, I know that got airplay at some point, but I'd never heard it on the air. I've only heard it on the album, so that's really strange. So in 98, I realized that there's a hard strengthening of just control, like music control, like meaning that we're going to buckle down on program, what was allowed by music programmers, right? The people in charge of placing the CDs and telling which tracks to play. And that is a thing, by the way, right? I worked for radio for like 4 or 5 years. So that's a thing. Now, what's interesting is the late night hours. There's a lot you were able to do in late night hours that you didn't necessarily have to stick to during the day. There's a thing called safe harbor hours, which I want to say it's 10 o'clock at night to like 6 in the morning or something like that. That you're able to kind of do a lot of willy-nilly stuff. That's why sometimes in late at night, if you listen to radio, and what I mean by radio, I mean FM, AM, they'll play unusual stuff, like things that you're like, it's kind of interesting, right? Especially the cooler, more interesting DJs, right? I'm not even sure if they're even tied to that as much anymore. So which way, I noticed this happening. I noticed all of a sudden the goal was to get rid of stations, or to shut them down or marginalize them or throw them onto the internet. Like BRU still exists now because they shut it down eventually. Yeah, that's the thing. And BRU was, I want to say initially a college station from Brown or RISD, something like that. And they shut it down. And that was like heartbreaking. But it still kind of exists as an underground stream. Like you can get an app and listen to it. But it's not the same, right? The goal was to get it off the public airwaves, the instant access. And I knew that, and what's weird is back in the 90s, I knew this was happening just by listening to the radio. Something's wrong, right? Like, why? I don't know. Granted, okay, we're still listening to Beastie Boys, but what happened to A Tribe Called Quest, like De La Soul? Like, that's not being played as much. It's just interesting music selection, right? And even with the Beastie Boys, it wasn't even off-cuff stuff. Like, when Check Your Head came out, they played a lot of that album. But yet, for some weird reason, by the time, like, Hell and Acid came out, it was only, like, the hits. Stupid things like that. And I was written off kind of like, that whatever. And like, maybe it's just nobody's, junk statement. Over time, it got snuffed out. To the point where somebody said to me, he's like, wow, man, that whole BRU thing kind of got shut down. I'm like, yeah. Did you expect that to happen? No. I said, I told you, something happened in 98. That's a very important thing. I mean, I knew the mergers were happening, right? Because you're hearing it on air. Like, this all happened in the Clinton. But that's important to know. So sometimes I'll assess things. I'm like, thinking about them. I'm like, that suggests that. It definitely context clues, and then you get follow-up information, and you're watching these patterns kind of emerge. So after a while, right, people are like, you should write this down. Whatever. And so there was a series of events that took place recently, which I'm not going to get into right now, that really kind of motivated a lot of people to say, you need to start talking about this stuff. Like I said to you in episode 1, it's hard. Like, talking to a void is difficult, right? I've gotten a little better with it, right? But the idea of, like, presenting this material without proper context. I'm trying to tell you, like, again, a lot of this is speculative. But as time is going on, I'm going to point out some of the things that give more ammunition to the argument. Because that's how things move. I mean, the flow of information kind of happens in an interesting way. Like, I'll give you, people bag on conspiracy theories, right? I don't necessarily bag on them because I view conspiracy theories in two categories. There's inner core conspiracy theory, outer core conspiracy theory, right? Inner core conspiracy theory is the most whack job, fucking insane fucking conspiracy theory, right? But in all honesty, who the fuck do we know, right? Okay, that's the thing. Take it with a large grain of salt, maybe a big, huge piece of block salt, right? And just entertain the idea, right? Then there's outer core conspiracy theory, which is the stuff that's interesting because it's speculative, but there's enough things going on there to suggest this might be possible, right? John Kennedy's assassination. There's two interesting ones with that. I heard back in the day when I was a kid. Like he went to another hospital and is living, but his brain dead, right? That was the crazy inner core conspiracy theory, right? The magic bullet theory and the interest in wanting to eliminate him from office. What we'll throw into the Oliver Stone category or the Jim Garrison category, right? There's enough there to push it over into reality, right? This has happened during the course of my life. Like the thing that sparked the Vietnam War was the Gulf of Tonkin incident, right? That's what got America's full involvement into the war. But there was already outer core conspiracy theories suggesting this wasn't a thing. And this is the interesting thing about history. History is not as solid and brick-laid as you think it is. The way it's presented to you in the high schools, secondary school, and primary school, it's almost like you can't move it. But there's still research being done. And this is why I think, historians should be constantly given grants, right? Because the more research done, the more you're able to carve out context, right? And find documents that suggest otherwise, right? That's a whole other discussion, So over time, that speculative outer core concept of the Gulf of Tonkin incident never happening became a reality. Enough evidence supported the fact that this thing never happened. It was misstructured and presented. Now, I'm not going to suggest who did it, what did it. That's not what I'm here for. This episode's not about that. But it's about the idea of presenting the model in which I'm operating in, right? So that became fact. Now, here's what's interesting when it became fact that this never happened is it didn't go to the general public. You, I, me, person down the street, person over there, never got this information. When this information switches over from outer core conspiracy theory, it goes into the textbooks, but specifically for the ones that are in higher education, college. And it trickles down gradually to the other textbooks, right? So sometimes you'll find yourself arguing with a younger kid about something, whatever planet in the solar system is, what's classified as planets, some scientific things, some math things, some whatever, because context is always changing. So what you learned maybe 40 years ago may not be exactly the same. I mean, understand Vietnam, John F. Kennedy's assassination, Malcolm X's assassination, any major incident isn't always necessarily covered in the textbooks as thoroughly, right? You got to take into consideration that most of the textbooks from primary and secondary schools are typically survey textbooks. They're covering a large span of time in the quickest way possible with highlights, right? The further you go up the education chain, the more narrowed you get down on the details, right? But so what happens is the information gets translated over and it goes to the upper echelon of the education system. And gradually, the everyday person gets it. Is that a problem? Yeah. So what we're left with is looking at things in examined context, right? So we can push things across that line, right? So when I'm presenting a hypothesis, like the idea that I think they've seen a finite amount of money, the film industry, That's not crazy, because I've never seen an industry want to kind of cut off their cash. I mean, they had a system at some point in time, literally, to reap benefits from a film that might fail in the box office. The fact they put out a film, they followed it and gave flooded people with advertisements for it to fight in niche markets. Now, they would get people to theaters and they would sit in the theaters. Now, if the film is good, word of mouth is going to spread. Thus explaining why I ended up being the weird-ass fucking film, The Liason. It's unpaid, right? This is not just me. This is several of us, right? But the fact that I know this film came out, that film came out, like I'm trying to talk to people about Cuckoo, which I like. It was a pretty good film. Because Neon, like, fucking Neon nailed it this year. They had Long Legs, Cuckoo, and they had fucking Honora, right? So, but I know this. Right? Oh, because you're into film, because you're into that weird subculture stuff. Yeah, but if they want to make fucking money, everyday people need to know this exists. And these aren't necessarily shitty films. You know, just because you don't hear about a film that's downplayed doesn't make it less than. It just means nobody's focusing on it because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Somebody decided not to give a push for all these films. And maybe because of the design of television, because that scattergun effect that television used to have, right? Maybe that's the thing. That effect has been lost, right? Now, the problem with expanding the markets the way you do and trying to find niche markets is it does subdivide, right? And that will exhaust their money. But the fact they have good product coming out, they have a shitty product, tons of shitty product, but they have good product, right? It does exist. Every year, good films do come out. So when you ever hear somebody, another fucking remake, blah, 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 blah. No, every year, good films come out. Some years, it's crazy how many good films come out, you know? So this exists. And it seems like there's only so much of their budget they're willing to spend. Now, how they ate themselves up is the fact they got rid of the largest catchment that they had in the history of recouping, right? Leaving movies out in theaters so they can catch money through word of mouth. And video stores. I know you're like, but there's stream services. Really? Really? You're standing by that? That's not a thing, right? Video stores are interesting because they were the larger catchment. Now, I'm going to spend some time talking about video stores because I love video stores. Like, they were just fucking dope as fuck. You know, you're not going to see me lament over Blockbuster or Hollywood Video. That's not what I'm saying. I mean real, genuinely good fucking video stores because they did exist. There was an interesting period of time between 85 and 91 before fucking Blockbuster showed up, where people had these niche stores and their libraries kept growing because there's a lot of interesting shit coming out. B films to indie films, right? So with that said, they undercut their own market at some point. They got rid of them, not realizing that's a natural cash thing. And what's strange is currently, as I'm talking about this right now, to the best of my working knowledge, Target has removed their DVDs in a tangible product from the shelves. Sometime in October, they decided, you know what? Let's not have any more tangible. But they'll say, well, it's on the website. You can go buy it online, right? I don't know. I'll get more into that in the next episode because that bothers me. Like, I'm more of a tactile person, right? So it's cool. It's online. That's great. But the physicality of it, I don't know, the whole thing bothers me. That mechanism bothers me. So they've reduced themselves all the way to having just DVDs for sale. And they're still having problems with that. They're still having problems with the stream. The stream is aggravating as fuck because there's so many fucking options. And not everybody's catching what they need to catch. right? You're not necessarily getting all the quality films on the streams, right? I mean, some of them are trying to go to distance, right? But that's too much. Whereas you had one simple store that did all that work for you, and you made money. Hands over, you made enough money to recover a loss of a film, even if it was a shitty film, right? That's a thing. So they basically bit their own fucking hand. Chewed the goddamn thing off and spit it out. And say, I don't need a hand. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, I need the hand. The way they make money is just amazing. Like, there's enough market there to grab. But the problem is nobody knows your product exists. That's fucking crazy, right? I'm a random person that has enthusiasm for it. And I put the product together and I pitch the ideas of things that I'm interested in. So I'll tell everybody, hey, this is coming out. And they'll look at me like, what are you talking about? So then I have to share data. Maybe they're hoping that's going to be a thing. But it's not done on a large enough scale. I mean, back in the day, you had television. The scattergun effect is via television, right? The reason why television was so not as interesting as film is for a bunch of reasons. I'm going to actually get into that before I get into the end of this. But television existed, and their goal was to get the largest audience possible, right? And they did this with, by developing programs. And then eventually they stopped developing programs. They just threw a program together and hoped you liked it, right? Their ability to present the market and make you aware of things existing was stronger then than it is now. And it's interesting because that was their conduit, that mass communication element. Currently, that's being blurred a lot for a bunch of reasons. That I think maybe over time, me doing this show will eventually kind of point that out. I mean, if you haven't figured out, even though I'm presenting the topic, it's really not about the topic. That's just one example of several. There's a lot more going on around that topic. Like even when I talked about the band Black Sabbath last episode, like people were expecting me to go through all the material and telling you all these geeky things about the music. And it really wasn't. It was about what they represented from that point on, what they did to change the culture. I'm telling you about the film industry right now has decided to do something over the course of the last 20 years has fucking done themselves wrong. And they don't even fully understand it. And they're automatically going to desperate needs. I mean, the comments you hear from these directors about the Marvel stuff is because the money is being absorbed into these larger projects, right? Okay, cool. So you can do a bunch of art house films too for really cheap money. Again, not necessarily an issue. But the problem is the little art house pitches are not being represented. That's the larger problem. You have good properties that don't cost a lot of money. And the mass public does not know these exist. So you're wondering why Cuckoo fails, right? Even though it's a good film. I'm telling you, go watch this fucking film. Actually, you know what? Fuck that. As soon as it comes out on DVD, go buy the fucking thing, right? It's interesting. There's a lot of cool fucking interesting shit. It's thriller, comedy, indirectly. But it's great. It's a good product, right? Longlegs made a lot of money because, what do you call it there? Nicolas Cage was in it. And he's already on a hotbed right now. He's on a hot streak. Right? Longlegs is a weird-ass fucking film. The trailer campaign alone is absolutely nuts. Right? So was Cuckoo. But it wasn't as much as Longlegs. I seen probably more ads, poster art, simple shots, these little blurbs for long legs. It made it really interesting. Whereas Cuckoo had interesting ads, but it wasn't as developed. But, okay, so I'm going to argue to go buy Cuckoo on DVD. Fuck the stream services, go buy the tangible. I'm going to get that in the next episode. So, let me pause for a second. If you can make sense of everything I just said, then cool. You're fucking dope. Right? So, from this point on, know that a lot of this stuff is going to be a hypothesis. It's going to be speculative. I'm going to have a blurb done up that's going to rant really quickly to you what this is. Right? I'm still putting this... I'm on episode 4, but I'm still assembling the first 6 episodes to launch. So even though I'm recording this, I'm going to record 5 probably next week. It's not... The series is not going to be out there until 6 is done. I have 24 planned for this year. Then season 3. I already started working on season 3. Okay. Movies are an art medium and literally descend from the arts, from photography, paintings, plays, and literature, to become a beautiful piece of work that will be seen over and over and over again. That's what it's designed to be. Film is a hot medium. That means it's enriched and coded, dense, designed to linger with thoughts. Like you can speculate, analyze. There's a lot of data compacted into films, like any other art. Like why people go to museums and look at paintings, right? There's layers to the code, right? Some of the breakdowns you see from some of these sites do that in a very interesting way. Now, I have some critique of them, but overall, they're doing you justice for the most part if you're not familiar with how to look at films, right? Television, is an artisan medium that do hire occasionally artists. They descend from mass communications. So television is a direct descendant of mass communications. So the formats, how it literally went was newspapers, telegraph, radio, television. Right? You had paid television in the late 70s. Television itself is considered a cold medium. Right? Television typically hires talent. When you hire talent, artisans are talented. Laborers are usually just general people that kind of know the function. They're just the people that pick up the shifts. They're part-timers, the on-callers. They're not the ones that looking at things as career. But artisans are a different beast, right? Tradesmen are a different beast. Those are the people that really look at their craft as important, but they also look at their craft as a job, a service. They know this is the budget I have to work with, this is the talent I have to present to, right? Where artists have a tendency to look beyond that. And it's interesting because when I was looking up the definitions for this, I'm going to give you the Merriam-Webster definition of artist, because honestly, the artist definition in the Oxford was not the same. So, take into consideration, television is mass communication is designed to mass communicate an idea, to program, right? This is all, I shit you not, this is communications one-on-one, right? Any general person learning communication right now, in college or at a high school level, this is communication one-on-one. Television can be on, it's not absorbing, it doesn't have to be, a lot of it has to be kind of spoon-fed to a certain degree. It's sensational to a certain degree. So it makes its profit. It does require artisans in order to keep it going. And every so often it will pull in artists or auteurs to rekindle the fire that it loses. But their goal is to maintain enough people to sell commercial space. I shit you not. That is the reason why all mass communication decided to communicate ideas to people, but their own profit revenue is from them keeping your attention so you can listen to the commercials. Okay? Film has piece. How film does it is typically they put everyday stuff into the thing, charge the money. So it's product placement, right? And sometimes it's the ramifications of the film. Like, obviously, if you go to see an X-Men film, chances you buy an X-Men figure. If the soundtrack's dope, so chances you getting that, getting X-Men logo, X-Men products after the fact. That's the thing, right? And sometimes they bank on that idea. So the product placement exists more or less in film. And that came more or less after the fact. That wasn't the goal. Whereas mass communication sold space. Now, an artisan is defined by Oxford Dictionary as a skilled labor that mainly works with their hands, perfecting a desired craft. Typically, food, textiles, ceramics. This could be even beyond that, like landscaping, so on and so forth. The artist is a person who creates art using conscious skill and creative imagination. So they're expanding beyond the normal realm. Now, I'm going to tell you this. How I ended up learning the difference was there was a sign in my shop years ago between a general laborer, a worker, a tradesman, craftsman, so on and so forth, and an artist. Artisans can become artists. They decide to break the mold and really kind of jump out. But their practicality in a sense keeps them at the surface. Like, so when, best example is, there's a Bogdanovich documentary out right now. And at some point in time, he interviewed John Ford. John Ford is a great American director. You go through cinema, film, you're going to run into tons of his films, right? Bogdanovich is part of that school, like Coppola and all those people, that were just geeked out by film, by cinema. And their goal was to evolve the idea. There's a great documentary to understand all this called A Decade Under the Influence. It was done by IFC, I think Ted Demme. It's 3 episodes. I advise anybody to go see it. Just check that out when you have a chance. So Ford could not see that his work was artistic. He had an eye, he had a skill, but he just did his job. If that makes any sense. It's like the person that carves out patterns for jewelry, or the person that paints cars, right? Sometimes they just look at themselves as being the person that's savvy enough to do the work, and their goal has so much pride in it that they just strengthen the work. They evolve the ideas, they make different techniques and structures, and that's where the creative stuff comes in, right? There's a book by, I think, Richard Florida called Creative Class. Pretty sure that's the name of it. I would say about 2/3 of that book is really worth your time. Because I think people have a tendency to associate artists as being a problem, or creative people as being a problem. And they are. But because they're trying to evolve things forward faster than the capitalist. They're trying to share things because of love and passion, enthusiasm, and the creative imagery and imagination. So artisans have to function to be able to do the work, but sometimes they can't expand the work. And that's why when mass communication is designed, and they're designed to show you episodes of these shows, and it's so sad because some of these shows on television, they're just so fucking weirdly cliche. Like the same shit I watched like 30 years ago because my fucking grandmother would have it on, right? Because that's that generation, they watch that. I'm like, God damn it, this is so fucking terrible, right? But then she would get upset when I would watch films. Like, but films, the goal for film is to get closer to life or to expand the idea, not to replicate things based on whatever the network wants to show you, right? That's the contrasting difference. So networks are comfortable with artisans, but they're not comfortable with artists. And that's why capitalists are really scared of artists, because artists will sometimes do work for free for themselves, not for the benefit of the others. If you don't believe me, maybe you haven't seen a lot of graffiti art. Now I'm going to implore you, right? I'm kind of sick of being this unpaid liaison. I feel like I should be sending invoices to these companies. But notice that this is a thing. So even though I said the savvy, like fucking liaison for the film, right? What I'm indirectly pointing out is that there's a deficiency in something. That there is now a dysfunction in something that was naturally functional. And the reason why they decided to go this way is because they thought having all this service on stream would cut down their overhead so much. They'll make money hands over fist. No, that's not the situation. Maybe we'll just give them more, have more channels, and more. No, that's not the situation. Actually, if anything, they should have learned something from cable. Before all these stream services, they should have learned something from cable. And I'm going to tell you the lesson based on my experience. Cable existed, came out. Somebody who's old enough to remember the phone cord, they used to go to this brown box, big, huge box, and you punch numbers in. Sometimes it had green, blue digital structure, or sometimes it had a red one, depending on what it is. This is before the cordless one, right? And these channels existed. And they didn't know, they were expanding them. Like, we needed to expand the audience, expand the diet, but they didn't have enough artists working on them. They would just rerun what was selling, right? Which is not necessarily bad. I mean, shit, HBO, really HBO, not this shit fucking Max. Like, genuine HBO. Like, the thing that has some level of fucking gravitas and some clout when you say the station, right? Because they've done a lot of great things. And currently right now, I think the dude's just taking a big fucking shit on him. That's just my interpretation of it, right? But HBO's library is fucking crazy. But HBO also played the same old standard films. Like, I've watched 48 Hours when I was a kid so much, right? The first Star Wars, so much. But these are good films. So obviously they keep my attention, right? I own copies of them, right? Because I like these films. So they knew that was a thing. So the artists created the film, but they will play the film, beat it up on their format. Now, channels kept expanding. And they had, in order for people to gain interest in them, they had to have something. There's a song by Bruce Springsteen called 57 Channels and Nothing On. This came out, I want to say, like late 80s, early 90s. I think it was Human Touch was the name of the album. That's the thing. Cable, by the end of the 80s, early 90s, had so many channels. But it really was just nothing. It was just white noise, right? Some of these channels went off and just gave you these big fucking infomercials, right? And that's what's happening, in my opinion, like right now. You have so many fucking programs that just are not good. They're just boring as fuck, right? But they need creatives. They don't want to hire. We expanded our pool because we weren't ready for the expansion of motherfuckers. You should have been. I remember reading an article in the mid 2Ks Soderbergh before he did the Magnolia thing, right? Because they were trying to figure out the mechanics of how to release. They knew streaming eventually was going to show up, but they needed to know how to expand, including the theater. I'm sorry, I like going to the fucking movies. You know, I have no problem with setting up a miniature movie structure for the art. And even buying. Like, if I can't make a movie and I really want to see a movie, I'm going to buy the fucking movie. Why? Because it's going to cost me the same amount to go see it with somebody I want to see it with. So why not fucking buy it? You know? This is art. This is our culture. Even when you expand, cinema is universal. It's worldwide. Right? So they shot themselves in the foot by breaking everything down. Now they have a loud, obnoxious stream structure, and they can't figure out how they're not recouping their money. Your box stores are now not going to sell your product. You really kind of need to think about the video store concept again. With that said, I'm going to simply end it like this, right? Again, if you're going to have comments about what the fuck I'm saying, my associate, a good friend of mine, is probably going to sift through this. She's helped me with all this stuff. I have a few people helping me with this. And I cannot express to you, there was a lot of people that wanted me to do this. So this is kind of for them. So if the word of mouth of what I'm doing, if this interests you, then so be it. But in all honesty, I don't necessarily care. Like, I'm doing this because in the end, I know they're right. I just don't understand the context yet. And I'm only on episode 4 of why they're right, why they think I should be broadcasting myself with these ideas to you. So the video store thing might have a naysayer. They're like, oh, business school bullshit, right? Or some fucking stupid fucking, I don't give a fuck what you have to say. Records are still a great format. CDs will be looked at as a great format. Cassettes, not as much, but cassettes did have a cool thing. Cassettes, mixtapes, it was the Beastie Boys. Good mixtape will put you in the right mood. That's a quote. That's true. So, but once CDs came out and you're able to do something similar, notice I didn't say the same, it expanded upon. User-friendly cassettes are a fucking nightmare. 8-tracks were a better choice. Yes, I'm old enough to remember 8-tracks. Right? Reel-to-reel is not a bad choice too, but not everybody's set up for that. So records exist. Records have existed the entire fucking time. Right? They've existed since they started coming out. But somebody's going to say, but no, they weren't. I'll say, shut the fuck up. Just because you don't go to record stores, like fucking legit boutique record stores, doesn't necessarily mean the product didn't exist. They just weren't in the box stores. I am enthusiastic that they're back at the full spectrum that they are. Right? Again, I'll probably get into that next episode. But I've been advocating for records for years. Right? So what I'm saying to you is that video stores should exist again. Even if you make them friendly, they should exist. They were prematurely pulled out of our culture. These companies need to consider this idea because they are losing tons of money because of the stupidity of removing this shit quickly. Their weird fantasy trip of some, like, I'm waiting for them to start sewing, like, we have a new fad, sew a television to your forehead. I don't fucking understand it. The goal is to go into the metaverse or whatever the fuck bullshit that is, right? That's the idea. They fucking artificial life in the market, right? Like the Operation Ivy song. That's just tons of bullshit. But based on the concept of records, right? I knew that was a thing. The movie thing I'm talking about right now is a thing. Please let me take a retirement from being your fucking liaison. That's all I'm asking, really. There will be another podcast. This is post. The other podcast is actually going to be a film podcast. So if you're wondering, like, all this shit this man's talking about. This right here is commentary based on the odds. And sometimes not. Thus naming the title Fistful of Fuckery. So the next podcast is more or less to do with films. That's the one that will probably be more frequent. This will be every other week for a season. And then there's a third. I know what I said in the first episode, but I'm thinking, okay, so philosophically, when I work at places, right? If you're afraid of doing something you feel you don't have the skills to do it, you just dive the fuck into it. And that's what I'm trying to muster up. I'm trying to muster up how this is interpreted for the sake of doing better service. And you're like, but you don't give a fuck about our comments. You're right, I don't. But I also don't want to not do you a service in regards to what I'm presenting. It's a thing. It's a work thing. It's an ethic thing. Okay? I'm going to end up hearing your fucking comments back. Because somebody's like, do you believe this person said this? It's going to come back to me. I cannot fucking avoid that. I'm going to try to. I'm not going to go fucking seek this shit out, but it is. So the third one will be a large group of people. And what's weird is about the third one is I'm expecting that to be the really big one because I think that's missing in such an interesting way. I think the problem with most podcasts, it's usually famous people. And I don't begrudge them. I like some of them. Actually, I think they all should exist with podcasts. I kind of, some of it's just books presented as podcasts. I think that's kind of fucking dope too. I think all this type of programming should exist, right? So people can access it. But at the same point in time, I figured that would be the bigger thing. Because people talking about layman shit, everyday stuff, general topics, not being famous sometimes is more interesting than being famous. I'm going to reiterate that again. Not being famous and hearing how they're working through life is more interesting than famous people. Because of the economic echelon. I don't make a hell of a lot of money. I'm presenting these ideas because it's markers. If I end up being right down the road, I get more clout in regards to you. So that sounds weird, but I'm going to tell you why. You have influences. People that feel they need to do whatever. Ego petting, whatever the fuck shit they do. There's so much inside of me right now talking about this. That's saying, why the fuck are you doing this? And that, I think, gives it merit. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to critique what's going on. And that's what my job is. I do this naturally. I'm now just broadcasting on a show. I want to see a fucking video store again. Just so you know. Just the idea of walking. A good one, too. Not a shitty fucking... One thing people forget about Blockbuster, and this is, again, I'm ending this. I'm already over an hour marker, is that they got so big so quickly, and they're weird. Like, it's like Walmart back in the day. This big so quickly that they're now saying, we need the Blockbuster version of this film. We can't have the Harvey Keitel, uncanny, non-rated Bad Lieutenant. You know, we need a different cut of the Basketball Diaries. Like, that's how fucking weird they got. Right? Now, I'm not even into the idea of a lot of pornography. Right? Maybe my 12-year-old self was. You're like, oh my God. Fucking Generation X. But I knew something was wrong with the company as soon as they took over Major Video in New England and they cut out the porn section. I was like, what the fuck were you about to get into? And what's cool is they at least mirrored Major Video, which was the franchise in New England. But they didn't go, they eventually whittled down the content in the stores. It was the fucking strangest shit ever. Again, there's an episode coming up about video stores that I want to talk about because there's a couple of them I really genuinely loved. And this will reemphasize why they're needed. Thank you for listening. I'll be seeing you for episode 5 when I start recording now, hopefully next week.